All right, this guy right here is a freaking American hero. Why? Because he stands his ground, looks tyranny in the face, and he doesn't move. This is Philip Turner. I want you to listen to his story. I'm going to make comments along the way, but I really want you to go to his channel, The Batusai, subscribe, hit the bell notification icon. This guy right here, when he dies, he should get a hero's funeral. Check this out.
Am I under arrest?
Yeah, you failed to identify. Are you going to identify yourself, yes or no?
I'm still asking what crime have I committed.
All right, told you, you're being suspicious. I've got suspicious behavior that you're doing, so at the very least, you have to identify yourself. Are you going to continue not to identify yourself?
Texas Penal Code 3802 says I can choose to identify myself.
Is that a yes or no?
Detained. And if I'm under arrest, then I have to identify
Okay, well, you're
myself.
under arrest.
So
Galveston Police. How long has YouTube been around? How many YouTube videos are out there making you guys look bad? You guys out there making yourselves look bad because you don't even know your own laws and you're trying to enforce tyranny under the color of whatever law you think you got. And you got people with cameras who know your laws better than you do, and you're still going to violate their rights.
So are you going to identify yourself, yes or no?
What am I under arrest for?
Are you going to identify yourself, yes or no?
I'm just asking what am I under arrest for?
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video. This video is going to cover the event that led up to this particular incident here that put $10,000 into my pocket, along with 2 sergeants being demoted. And we're also going to cover my experience in jail, which is very interesting, so stay tuned for that. My sole purpose of going to Galveston was to take B-roll footage of the police station and also take video of the Galveston Fallen Officer Monument to confirm if there was a certain black detective that was left off. This information came from the Officer Down Memorial page, and the detective name is Charles Burrell. Detective Charles Burrell was in a restaurant at the corner of 28th and Church Street when 2 men approached him from behind. One of the men shot Detective Burrell in the neck, the bullet ranging upward through his jaw and lodging into his head. Both men were quickly captured and the weapon was recovered. Detective Burrell was taken to a local hospital where he was able to identify one of his assailants. The investigation into the shooting revealed that Detective Burrell, an African American, had been working to wipe out cocaine dealing in the segregated areas of Galveston. He had arrested his 2 assailants, both Caucasian males, several times in the recent past for drug dealing. Detective Burrell died from his wounds 1 week later on July 30th, 1914. Galveston's Fallen Officer Monument pretty much recognizes those who have died in the line of duty since 1873. So why was Detective Charles Burrell left off? I received this tip from a Reddit user and went to Galveston to investigate. I took some B-roll footage of the police station, and as I made my way to the Fallen Officer Monument, I was detained by former Archie Chapman for suspicious activity.
Think about the irony of this entire situation. A black man is going to Galveston to see if a black man, a black cop, is on a fallen officer monument, only to be apprehended by white cops because the black man refused to move away from his constitutional freedoms.
You going to identify yourself? No. Okay, go ahead and put your hands behind your back.
Not to come over here because we're going to go.
Put your hands behind your back.
Can I put this down? I just don't want to drop it. I just want to put it down.
It's fine.
Okay.
Actually, put it right here. Okay, so at this time,
This is as ironic and tragic as Jeff Gray from Honor Your Oath Civil Rights Investigation getting arrested and harassed on the Civil Rights Museum steps with a sign that says, "God bless the homeless vets."
I'm going to turn off your recording, okay?
Is there a reason why you turning it on?
Well, you're going to go to jail, and so do you want to leave it running while you're in jail?
Yeah.
You want to leave it running the whole time?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to take this, and I'm going to put this in the back of the unit, okay? Do you have anything that's going to stick or poke me?
No. Am I under arrest?
Yeah, you failed to identify. Are you going to identify yourself, yes or no?
I'm still asking what crime have I committed.
All right, told you, you're being suspicious. You're videotaping people's license plates.
I'm not videotaping.
Okay, because of that,
videotaping license
I've got suspicious behavior that you're doing. So at the very least, you have to identify yourself.
Because you're exercising constitutionally protected rights and you're engaged in constitutionally protected activity, that gives me the ability to view you as suspicious. That gives me the ability to put torture cuffs on you, to throw you in the back of the car, and for me and my buddies to kidnap you and take you into a rape cage.
Are you going to continue not to identify yourself?
Texas Penal Code 3802 says I can choose to identify myself.
Is that a
if
yes
I'm
or no?
lawfully detained. And if I'm under arrest, then I have to identify
Okay, well, you're
myself.
under arrest.
So I'm
So
under
are
arrest.
you going to identify yourself?
What
Yes
am
or
I
no?
under arrest for?
Are you going to identify yourself? Yes or
I'm
no?
just asking, what am I under
Okay.
arrest for?
All right. Well, listen, I'm going to turn this off. All right, because I'm not going to waste your battery or anything like that.
It's okay. It's
It's
6 hours battery.
It's documented.
Yes,
It's documented. I'm turning it off. I, Sergeant Chapman, is turning off your video camera. Okay?
What's that?
At this point, I was unlawfully arrested and charged with failure to ID.
I love how calm Philip is being right here because it really highlights the tyranny of the batch law enforcers.
Shortly after I was arrested, I was then taken to the Galveston County Intake Center, which happens to be part of the same building I was recording. I was then escorted by Archie Chapman into the intake center and was placed in a holding area. While waiting in the intake area, I was approached by Archie Chapman and former supervisor Gilbert Villarreal. They were pressing me for ID and I still would not give it to them. I asked over and over again, what was I being charged with? They both said failure to ID. In the back of my mind, I knew that the failure to ID is a secondary charge in this particular situation. After they both realized that I was not going to provide my ID, they both left to attend to other matters. Later on, I saw Archie Chapman with my video camera looking through the contents and saying, hey, this guy went to other PDs. We need to figure out who he is. I did confirm with the DA later on that Archie Chapman did not have a warrant to go through my camera, and he also did not have my consent, which made this a blatant violation of my Fourth Amendment right.
See, all these cops should be sensitized to the sacredness of the individual rights of every single American, including their own. Because when they're trampling Philip's rights or your rights or my rights, they're trampling their own rights. They're trampling their family's rights. Any loved one that they have in their life, they're trampling everyone's rights.
Denying several requests and demands for my ID, they then gave up and booked me and my property under the name John Doe. This made the supervisor of the jail very upset. So upset that they didn't give me any food to eat that night. Somehow, some way, he took my keys and left with Archie Chapman and another deputy to go find my vehicle using the key fob. And after they found my vehicle, they went inside and searched it and found my ID as shown in the dash cam footage.
Isn't failing to feed another human being when they're hungry cruel and unusual punishment? Why did the cops in this case only get demoted? Why didn't they get charged, sentenced, and jailed and have their assets liquidated? Why would it take taxpayer money to put into Philip Turner's pocket instead of taking it out of the pockets of the people who actually committed the crime?
When they arrived back to the jail, they then showed me my ID while I was in the middle of being booked in and said, this is what happens when you question authority.
Wow.
As he was referencing my bumper sticker on the side of my car. The sheriff deputies
This is what happens when you stand for your American rights. This is what happens when you don't budge away from the very thing that I swore to protect, defend, and uphold. And now here you are protecting, defending, and upholding it against our tyranny. Ow.
booked me under my real name and then took me behind these doors and placed me into the holding cell that had a better view of where the sheriff deputies were working behind his desk and answering the phones. I was in the holding cell with a handful of detainees who began to share why they were arrested, which ranged from aggravated assault, some had warrants, jaywalking, and failure to ID. Well, the failure to ID grabbed my attention and I asked the guy, wait a minute, why were you charged with failure to ID? He told me that he had warrants and that he lied about his identification. And I said, oh man, that sucks. And then that same guy asked me why I was there. And I told him, yeah, I was there for the same thing, failure to ID. And someone said, let me guess, you got warrants too? I said, no, I didn't have any warrants. I just didn't give my ID over to the officer. Well, everybody just started staring at me and they were like, what? All you have to do is just give your ID. You don't have warrants and you wouldn't be here in the first place. Like that's
And that's the problem with Americans today. You just comply. Just roll over. Just do what they tell you to do, and it'll go easier for you. There's no reason for you to go to jail. Sometimes, man, when something matters, you stand for it. Anytime something matters, you stand for it. If your freedoms in America aren't worth standing for, what the hell are you calling yourself America for? What are you calling yourself an American for? Why are you singing over the land of the free, home of the brave at sporting events? Stop doing that, because you're not free. You're not acting like you're free. You're just going to cave at the first wave of adversity. Oh my God, I'm being intimidated by agents of the state with guns. I better give my ID or I'm going to get in trouble. At what point do you draw the line and go, no, you ain't getting it? No, I'm not just standing for my rights. I'm standing for you and your family's rights, you freaking tyrant.
Stupid. Why would you do that? Some of the detainees said I would definitely be going to county and that the magistrate there has a certain reputation. That's when I began to talk about the failure to ID law and try to explain to them when and when it does not apply. And before I knew it, I had my very own master class explaining how the Texas ID law works. A few of the detainees were very interested and began to ask me questions, and which I responded with the appropriate answers.
It is not the majority who will prevail, but the irate and tireless minority who are keen on setting brush fires of freedom in the minds of men. Way to go, Philip.
And in the end, I concluded that some of these guys just really didn't know their rights at all. While the discussions about the Fourth Amendment continued inside the holding cell, there was a whole new monster brewing outside the cell. I kept hearing sheriff deputies walk by saying, "Who is this guy? Where did he come from?" They keep calling about this guy. Well, it turns out that I had a few associates and a few subs calling into the jail on my behalf to make sure that I was okay. And that didn't sit well with the sheriff deputies. They began to make fun of me and mock me. And then one of these sheriff deputies moved me to a different cell.
They were mocking him because it's a culture of evil filled with people who are evil, who are just there to get a paycheck. And when your paycheck is dangling off the end of that string, you have no incentive to do good. When your pay comes from you doing evil, there is no incentive to do good.
Because they didn't want my master class affecting their detainees. In that holding cell was another individual who was drunk and belligerent the whole night, yelling at the officers and cussing at them, and pretty much kept me up all night. But eventually, that individual went to sleep, and I finally went to sleep myself. Morning came, and a sheriff deputy walked by all the cells to make sure everybody was awake because the magistrate was coming. The magistrate came and sat behind the desk, which was visible from all the cells. One by one, the sheriff deputies would let us out by the cells, and we would sit down on these concrete benches, and we would wait for the magistrate to call our names up. Once our name was called, we would appear before the desk in front of the magistrate, where he would read the probable cause affidavit and determine if we were going to be sent to county or given a bond. Once they called my name, I got up and started to approach the desk. At that point, the area got entirely quiet, so quiet that you could probably hear a pin drop. Some of the sheriff deputies began to talk.
It's because he's the only guy in the room who has power because he has knowledge. Everybody else is ignorant. They're getting schooled by him in the master class. I'm like, shh, let's see how the master does.
Amongst themselves saying, "Hey, this is the guy that kept calling about. Who is this guy?" And as I looked off to the side, I could see that the night shift supervisor, Gilbert Villarreal, was still there. And he had this smirk on his face, shaking his head, probably thinking, you're going to get what you deserve. After the magistrate read the probable cause affidavit, he then asked me why I didn't identify myself when the officer requested. I then replied saying, under Texas ID law, I'm not required to. The only requirements for me to identify is if I'm being lawfully arrested. If I'm being lawfully detained or a witness, I just can't lie about my identity. I also mentioned that the probable cause affidavit didn't mention any alleged crime or violation. And the magistrate says, you do know that the law changes every 2 years. And I responded by saying,
wrong answer by the magistrate. He should have said, wait a second. You mean to tell me you were sitting in this holding cell, and fear should have come over this magistrate. You were sitting here as an American in this holding cell because you failed to ID and there's no crime that they were holding you for. They didn't suspect you of committing a crime, yet they were expecting you to give them your ID and make you insecure in your person. Who are these officers? Bring them before me because I'm going to try them. He should have been filled with holy fear if what Philip said was true right here. And then get the cops to testify. Yeah, that's exactly why we did it. And then see the body cam because you know the cops are going to lie. That's how important rights should be to a magistrate. If you're going to have that kind of position, then you need to be fair and equitable. I don't care if the laws change. You have a Fourth Amendment right. You have a solemn oath, magistrate, to uphold, protect, and defend Philip's right and your family member's right to be secure in your person. And you can't be more insecure than be in a holding cell because you didn't make yourself insecure in your person by giving your ID.
Well, if the law hasn't changed in the last 6 months, then it's still the same. The magistrate agreed with me and granted me a $500 personal bond. I then turned around and purposely looked at Gilbert Villarreal, who was red in the face and fuming, which was very satisfying to see.
Yeah, but that's still highway robbery in the face of the magistrate knowing from Philip's own lips that we have Section 3802. I'm not required to give my ID. I wasn't suspected of committing a crime, and there's no charge of a crime against me. He should have gone, man, the magistrate should have said, we are in some serious trouble, but puts a $500 bond out.
Just like that, I walked out as a free man with a court date to return at a later time. I was then contacted by KHOU 11 News to do an interview in which I will link that article in the description box below. In that article, Michael Gray is a spokesperson for Galveston, and he said his arrest wasn't a direct result of his photography, Gray said. He was arrested for failure to identify. He was arrested because he would not produce identification, and the legality of that is going to be determined through a Galveston Police Department internal investigation. I thought the courts determined that. Turner said he didn't identify himself because Texas law doesn't require a citizen to offer his name unless he's under arrest, a point confirmed by KHOU legal analyst. Texas has a statute that says very clearly you don't have to identify yourself to a police officer until and unless you're arrested, said Gerald Treese, the dean of South Texas College of Law. I think this photographer guy knew what he was doing. I do want to mention that the Texas failure to ID law has changed since then, so if you're going to exercise your rights, make sure you're up to date on any current changes in the laws. My failure to ID charge was thrown out and I did not have to reappear in Galveston. However, I still had some unfinished business, so I returned to confirm if the detective's name was left off the fallen officer monument statue, which was confirmed. My attorney, Kervin Althofer Jr., caught wind of the incident and sent a demand letter to the city of Galveston, which settled quickly for $20,000. I guess that's not bad for one night in jail.
So what is bad is that true justice wasn't really done, and the American tax cattle, at least in that area in Galveston, had to foot the bill for what another group of tyrants chose to do over and above even their own laws, let alone the Constitution. And to add insult to injury, the black detective's name wasn't on the fallen officer monument as they chose to cage another black man about 100 years later for exercising his constitutionally protected rights. Like I said, Philip Turner is a hero and he should be seen as such. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the Batusai YouTube channel and hit that bell notification icon because I'm sure he's got some great content coming up, educational and informative content that will impact the world. I will see you in the next video.